you couldn't wish for more than seeing 5 waka haurua on a beach like this. So significant historically, literally under the moa where you can see pa site indentation, and it reminds us of the fact that Maori were here with their Pacific voyaging traditions many, many years before Pākehā arrived. The voyage itself, though, has helped us think about, we both share that voyaging tradition. All New Zealanders left from somewhere and arrived here. But that Polynesian influence, because of Tuia, has allowed us to cross over. Maori were proud of his connection and, of course, of their own skills and experience. But I think many New Zealanders who did not have that Maori connection also have understood now that Tuia and Captain Cook and others on the Endeavour shared the two traditions of navigation knowledge, and this is who we are. And for me, the whole set of experiences of the voyage and people's interaction and the exchange, and watching the sailors on the Endeavour want to go on the waka and vice versa, it reminds me that New Zealanders love the sea. At heart they are voyagers, and there's just a real openness to learn and share, and that's been a very strong gift that Tuia has delivered. We could not have let the chance go, notwithstanding that we were marking the first meeting. You have to look back toward your future, and in looking back we knew that we needed to acknowledge the sites, and now there's science to support those sites. I mean, many knew they were there, the stories of Maori families told us they were there, but both the Wairau and the Mangahawea site in the Bay of Islands, the science is done. There's no debate. Pacific people came and went off those two sites across a number of centuries. And this is also who we are, that the voyages were active and the evidence is very clear. Well, look, certainly I learnt a huge amount. And this sort of notion of Maori drifted here has been completely debunked. I think we've finally got it clear that Captain Cook, while he was a brilliant navigator and voyager, did not discover New Zealand. So there have been a few things put to bed, or put in context properly. But coming back to the science, the DNA work that has been done on both Mangahawea and the Wairau site tells us that there were people from all over the Pacific. It wasn't just a single waka or even a single destination. And they were arguing it was almost as if on purpose they had collected a broad range of people to build up a new community. So the genetic pool was broad, not narrow, so to speak, and it allowed an establishment population to occur, not right at the beginning, but subsequently. Tuia 250 is now behind us, but Tuia is alive and well. I think the feeling of we are special and bound together as a nation, but unique and different, it's going to prevail a long time beyond this particular commemoration. And while we're finishing the voyage, it is simply a beginning of the next step. A lot of people, including a lot of the NCC team, are focused on 2040. They're saying, well, dates do help people turn their mind properly. And they would love to see 4 or 5 year plans. 5 years from now, then 5 years hence. But thinking about who do we want to be and how do we want our nation to look and feel in 240, and then reverse engineer it. So what do we do first? Things that have struck me during this process is that we now have, in some instances, Po, for example, marking sites that otherwise New Zealanders would not have known where they were standing. So Mangahawea now has a beautiful blue Po that shows that this was the earliest of landing sites from the Pacific. Where you had Cook and Maori meeting in the Bay of Islands, you've now got a whole series of new explanations with both lenses, and so whoever lands there, tourists or New Zealanders, they'll understand better. If you go to Whitianga and to Ngāti Hei, you see the interface between Docks Beach and the marae, and the most beautiful and striking and confronting both po but messaging that helps New Zealanders think about where we are and then think forward. And even down south, there are new things in the Marlborough Sounds that really speak quite differently. We're not there yet though, because I would like DOC to do a proper cultural map of their own sites for which they're responsible and ask the question, are these sites speaking to both cultures? And if they're not, to make a plan so that over the next 5 and 10 years the work they've started can be further advanced, because we will not be there until any New Zealander that comes to any of these beautiful beaches can see their Pākehā and Māori history with equal respect and visibility, so that we really can be proud of who we are. Even this morning in the greeting line, the kaumātua there have a huge expectation that this has opened up a conversation they don't want to stop. And they are feeling as if it's a safe place. Tuia has delivered a safe environment in which these conversations can be had. It's not contesting a view, it's collaborating on listening carefully, sharing, and then understanding and recommitting. And I think that's a ground that won't be easily given up. So it's not just what government does. I think that the 19 hapu and iwi who've been directly involved, and then the many who have been on the edge but in some ways involved, they are talking from their perspective as much as Pākehā are talking. But coming back to your question, we must treasure and protect waka haurua. Look at this, that this is who we are, and this is a heritage fleet. I rate this more highly than, to get myself into trouble, the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra. The government funds the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra $13.5 million or more a year. The New Zealand Ballet, $5.4 million, and we don't fund these in any substantial way. But my children and my grandchildren need to see that, and all New Zealand children, from whatever perspective, we must have these. We must respect the captains and the crews. We must see that they're supported in a professional way, because they are as much our national treasure as buildings that were built by Pākehā around the 1800s. NCC, the people who have worked with us, so NCC are just passionate New Zealanders, Māori and Pākehā, who've said, I'm in because the future matters. And they were not agnostic in taking a position. They wanted to be for New Zealand respecting its history and valuing it, but then allowing it to be shared and to grow. We need a full 10-year integrated curriculum designed. And while access to waka haurua, because this is a teaching environment, and we've learnt with our travelling education equipment how it brings stories to life, we need the curriculum agreed first as the platform, and then we need the experiential learning that waka haurua and waka, and also the resources that can support our teachers to bring this to life. All of those are priorities that the leaders from the National Coordinating Committee want the government to hurry with. So yes, it's complicated. Yes, it could take a lot of time to debate, but the appetite in New Zealand is far further ahead than Wellington, if you'll forgive me. And you might say, well, I used to be a Wellington wonk in my political career, but my experience around New Zealand over these last few months, and in fact over the last 3 years, is there is a huge appetite. There are voices of concern, and they need to be acknowledged and referenced, but we mustn't let them get into the full line of sight, because there are far more New Zealand families who are deeply anxious to have their children taught in a way that really reflects who we are. So we need to do the work, and in my opinion, a group of people committed and competent in the dual heritage kaupapa and knowledge and skill and experience need to be brought together in wānanga this issue. It's not a matter for education experts. They deliver the story. I think when you're talking about New Zealand history, you need it to be live. And NCC spoke yesterday about whether this should come from a whakapapa lens, where wherever you come from, if you start from that point, you get people thinking about why they left and how they arrived and what's happened since and how we're bound together. But that deep sense of personal identity, I think, allows children to be strong. And I think it's a very interesting idea. It's one that we offer the Ministry of Education for consideration, that in designing the 10-year curriculum, using a whakapapa principle, that children over that 10 years grow and learn about who they are and where they came from and what their family stories are and how they can own them and how they can share them and how they can learn from them so they can look forward and be successful on those courageous pathways, going over horizons fearlessly, which is what their ancestors did, whether they were Maori or Pākehā. I think it's a very inspired concept because it's not having historians arguing about facts. It's having families sharing stories, many of which are facts, but also memory matters here. And one of the gifts of Tuia is that in addition to the knowledge around science and the evidence, there have been memories shared that have been passed down, and I believe they are equally, if not more valuable, because in them lie the stories. And let me give you one. So India, the captain of Whawhaiti, yes, when she was speaking about stories, she said, remember that we watch what goes from our land to another land. And while there are stories about Maui, for example, casting a hook and pulling up the land, what that really means in a Pacific voyaging lens is that the land draws us to it. And I think that's a concept that's so different. For Pacific voyagers, they look up when they find land and mark stars to tell them land is below. Often the Pākehā view is you draw the line and you try and make sense of the map on the ground as being geographic and actual. Both get you to where you're going, but that different lens is something that I think is so valuable as you think about why do our Pacific voyagers say that land draws us to them, and or that the land can draw them to it. And they say, well, we've watched the birds for many hundreds of years and they go somewhere and they come back. They go and they come back. And in the end, we're bound to go and inquire where they've gone, and it draws us to it. Yes. And that too, that's a beautiful concept. It's a meaningful concept. And when you put it alongside the myths and legends that I was taught as a little white kid a while ago, and I put it now in my understanding of the Maori context, it means so much more, because I've sat in Tahiti with the voyagers as they look out, and they said, well, we sat here for 600 years and watched, and then we decided to go. We'd go. And then come and go. I think one of the other highlights has been the connection with Tupaia. The Tahitian fleet, Whawhaiti, and their knowledge and presence and music and araha have been embracing in every respect. They have shared Tupaia, that we've learnt from them. We've shared our memory of Tupaia and they've learnt from it. But the insight of collecting the Tupaia stones from places where we knew he had been, and they're carrying them and gifting them. I've watched in many of these pohuri and seen people receive these gifts, and the Maori around the stones almost is palpable. But the whenua and the sharing of that connection is so symbolic. It is so much about the heart of we are a Pacific connected people, and Tupaia brings Maori and Pākehā together in those stones. It was one of the highlights of this project to be able to be with them, and we went up into the mountain in Tahiti and those stones were blessed prior to being brought down and put on the vessel. So they carry a little bit of me, but I understand the importance of them, and I think their presence on many of the marae that we've been on will endure far beyond this project.